Here's an uncomfortable truth about education. We might just be failing countless students by assuming they all come to school knowing how to learn, how to sit still, how to focus, and pay attention effectively. These are skills that many have simply never been taught.
In every classroom, there are usually a few kids who naturally know how to self-regulate in class to learn successfully. They sit up, they look and listen carefully, they nod to show that they're listening, and they generally keep their hands free.
Right. And on the other hand, there are many kids and teens that have not learned those skills. They simply don't know how to concentrate for 45 minutes and listen to the teacher instead of slouching in their chair and looking out the window.
As teachers, we basically have two options. Either we accept that the skills of students vary, some kids have it, other kids don't, and that's life. Or we can take responsibility and do everything we can to help every student succeed and create a more fair, just and equal opportunity for all of our students.
Yeah, right. And there is a strategy that can guarantee that all students become better learners. But this classroom technique has teachers divided, as Peps and me found out. The question is, are we helping students focus using this technique, or are we creating fear?
In this video, we're going to show you that one simple technique which has the potential to improve the student experience in every classroom in a significant way. It could even create greater equity in our classrooms, giving every child, regardless of their background, a much better chance of success.
Or maybe we are crossing a line that does more harm than good to kids. I guess let's find out.
So SLANT is an acronym that basically helps teachers to help their students to develop what Doug Lemov calls habits of attention. Habits of attention are the things that help our students to, well, pay attention, which is important because attention is the basis of learning. Things like sitting up straight, keeping their hands free, tracking the speaker, and so on. SLANT is just one such acronym. Some schools use STAR, SEAT. The name doesn't really matter. It's the habits that are important. Research is increasingly emerging to suggest that the more of these habits that are being done by our students, the greater the overall effect on attention and learning. However, not all teachers understand or even like the idea of habits of attention. So we thought we'd take a look at some of the main objections.
Many teachers cringe at the thought of implementing SLANT because it feels rigid and kind of controlling, like they're turning their classroom into a military training ground. And I get it. We don't want to turn our classrooms into boot camps. But Peps, I think there's something these teachers might be missing about what these techniques are actually trying to accomplish. Am I right?
When we talk to teachers about SLANT, some say they think it's too authoritarian and they don't like it. But in some ways, they're missing the point. SLANT isn't about controlling student behavior. It's about helping them to build the skills of attention. Just like you help your students to get better at maths, learning the skills of fractions, we're helping them to get better at paying attention. Our job is to help our students flourish when it comes to learning. And paying attention is something which must be taught, just like fractions.
Okay, I get that. But after all, don't we want kids to be intrinsically motivated? AKA, don't we want them to feel the need to pay attention and learn instead of forcing them to do it?
Yes, we do want them to be intrinsically motivated. But the research suggests that students tend to build that intrinsic motivation only after they feel lots of success. And to help them get to that point of feeling highly successful, well, we've got to get them to pay lots of attention and learn in the first place.
Another significant concern among educators is that structured techniques like SLANT might create some sort of anxiety or fear in students, especially those who are already struggling or have special needs. And to be frank, these stories about students feeling anxious or scared really hit home for me as a teacher. Because, of course, the last thing any of us want is for our classroom management to create fear or make learning harder for students who are already struggling. So, Peps, how do we address this very real concern that structure might actually harm some of our most vulnerable learners?
Absolutely, Emi. There's no place for fear or anxiety in the classroom. And it is possible to do SLANT badly. For example, when we increase the kind of level of structure in our classrooms, it can go wrong unless we also increase simultaneously the level of warmth, trust and care. If there's too much structure but not enough warmth, then it can feel a little bit controlling for students. But if there's enough care, then they will understand that what we're doing is trying to help them flourish. And of course, we sometimes need to make accommodations for particular students with particular needs, but only when we really need to. If we let kids to decide whether to pay attention and how to do it, then it's often those who are most self-regulating and most motivated who will end up being the ones who benefit the most, and will end up widening the gap in our classrooms. Research suggests that when we take responsibility for helping our students to build the habits and the skills of attention, it can alleviate the effects of lower IQ, of poorer backgrounds, and of weaker self-regulation. This means that SLANT and habits of attention like SLANT are some of the best things we can do to support our most vulnerable students, those with special educational needs.
From my point of view, teachers should spend some time to think about the question, how can I introduce the technique in a warm and very trustful way, right? So I guess body language and wording are very important here. I, for instance, as a teacher, would probably say something like the following. Hi guys, today I would like to introduce a new technique into our classroom, and it is called SLANT. I want you to think about it as a superpower that will help you to get the most out of every lesson. Also, I guess it makes sense to double check with your students who have different needs.
If you'd like to learn more about how to actually introduce things like SLANT into your classroom, then leave us a comment below and we'll think about doing a follow-up video on that.
Teachers are understandably skeptical about whether SLANT can be sustained over time. So many worry that it's just another classroom management hack that will lose effectiveness and eventually fall apart if I continue using it. So maybe the students will be very motivated to use SLANT in the first lesson, but then 3 weeks ahead, nobody's really interested in sitting up and listening and folding their hands on the desks. So to be precise, what happens when students don't comply, or when the novelty wears off, or when we try to implement this with older students who might resist? I really, honestly wonder, how do we make these strategies sustainable?
Good question. And actually, it's totally possible to make this a sustainable practice. Lots and lots of schools all around the world are doing this really well day in, day out. However, that's not to say that it doesn't take a significant amount of work to implement it and to keep it going smoothly. There's lots of good research out there around habit building, and that's the stuff that we can draw upon to help us do a good job of this. For example, it suggests that we need to make sure we roll out a new routine carefully, that we make sure we help our students to rehearse it lots at the beginning, and then that we reinforce that routine over time. When we do this, when we get SLANT right, it creates a much more positive and productive classroom. Students are able to pay attention more easily, and as a result, develop higher self-esteem and more success. And as a teacher, you end up with less behavior issues, having less arguments, and so have better relationships with your students overall. The potential benefits of habits of attention are significant, and so they're seriously worth considering. But if you're going to do it, you do need to do it properly.
I agree 100%. And also, I believe that it is not only students that benefit from the technique after all, right? Teachers will be probably keen to continue using it, since it will create a more positive and calm classroom after all. However, it might be challenging for individual teachers to implement the technique if it's not adopted school-wide, I guess. I myself would to some degree worry about being the only strict teacher who uses the technique at school. And I imagine it would be difficult to sustain when students come to my class frustrated because I'm the only one with these expectations. So after all, I think it makes a lot of sense to implement such a technique as a whole school instead of just an individual teacher. So if you have the chance to do that, go ahead and do it. By the way, if you want to support the work that we do, we would be thrilled if you could hit the like button and click subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this one. Here's what we truly believe. Every single child deserves to experience the joy of learning, the confidence that comes from success, and the sense of belonging that happens when everyone in the classroom is engaged and thriving. SLANT isn't about control. It's about giving every student, regardless of where they come from or what challenges they face, the foundational skills they need to unlock their full potential.
When we teach kids how to pay attention, we're not just helping them with their learning, we're giving them the tools they'll use for the rest of their lives. So while you might not like SLANT to begin with, it's absolutely worth sitting with that discomfort and challenging your views. Because what's on offer here is ultimately one of the greatest gifts we can give our students.
Thank you guys so much for paying attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week for another video. Also, please don't forget to leave your comments below. What do you think of SLANT? Do you think it's a good strategy? Would you see yourself implementing this strategy in your own classroom? Or would you like your kids to be educated by teachers who use this strategy? Or do you think it's rather harmful? We are very keen and looking forward to knowing what you guys think. And till then, see you around.